All right, stocks are having a hard time right now. Should you be moving money into something else? What's working right now? That's what I want to talk about today. Hello, my fellow Ripplers. This is Chris Miles, your cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. This show is for you. You've been working so freaking hard for your money, and you're now ready for that money to start working harder for you today. You want that freedom, that cash flow right now. You want to become work optional, where you work because you want to, not because you have to, because you have enough passive income coming in to let you have that choice, that freedom. And that's what we're here to do. But it's not just about getting you rich. It's about living a rich life, because as you're blessed financially, as you create greater capacity and greater financial freedom in your own life, you can now create greater blessings in the lives of those around you. That is what we're here to do today. Thank you for allowing me to create that ripple effect in your life today. And especially for those who've been following our podcast now for 11 years, special shout out to you for you being long, true, faithful listeners. Thank you so much for being that. As a reminder, if you guys ever have questions for us, you can always reach out to us at moneyripples.com. Lots of new information. We've actually just updated the website, so be sure to check that out today. All right, guys, so I'm bringing on a guest here, Bronson Hill. Now, Bronson, if you haven't heard of him, now he's the author of Fire Yourself, which you'll see in the background when you see him there. He's also a former financial advisor, or registered investment advisor, should say an RIA, right? So registered investment advisor. Yeah, I said that right, didn't I? Yeah, so former RIA. But now he's moved over into real estate. He's even doing some things with e-commerce as well as with oil and gas. And the big question for him is, where are we going now? What might be the investment that we can move into where the stock market may not be the best place anymore? Where else can we move our money? That's what I want to talk about with Bronson today. So Bronson, welcome to our show.
Hey, Chris, really excited to be here, man. Money does ripple. I'm excited to see how you're creating ripples for people to impact them for a very long time. So.
Well, I know you're doing the same thing. I know you've got your own podcast as well. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, so it's called the Mailbox Money Show. So we talk about, it's on the premise that unless you learn how to make money while you sleep, you'll work until you die. And so just the idea of a lot of people, even the book is about this too, of people say, hey, I want passive income, but then they go buy a rental house or two or three or 10, and then they realize they're creating another job for themselves. And so passive income really involves that making money while you're asleep. And so just really trying to figure out what are the assets, what are the ways to do that, and kind of strategizing around mailbox money.
Yeah. Well, give us more of your backstory, because I did tease a little bit, and I know you've spoken at great conferences. You were at the Best Ever show here recently, and you've even done things like you've spoken with like Ken McElroy, for example, right, and people like that. What's your story? What got you down this path?
Yeah, so I actually my background I talked about I was an investment advisor kind of on the side, but my main gig was I was a medical device sales representative for about 10 years. So I would go into surgery, I wear scrubs, I would, it was very interesting. It's heart surgery, some really interesting things.
Yeah.
But one thing I realized is that I wanted financial freedom, but really the thing that I didn't have was time freedom. And I saw this very acutely in the medical field, where I had a couple of physicians I worked with that made over $2 million a year each. And yet they were working 60 to 80 hours a week every week, and they couldn't really take vacations. When they didn't go to work, they didn't get paid. And I just thought, that to me does not look like financial freedom, even though I'm making a lot of money. And so I think this whole idea of like, even if you're making $2 million a year, you don't really understand how to invest and how to have your money work for you, then you're just going to kind of be a slave to it. And so for me, I started learning about real estate, had done some single family homes, realized that was, at least what I observed, was a very slow way to become wealthy. It was over the next 20 years, maybe you'll develop some equity, it'd be good. But I was actually able to, through a process of raising capital for real estate, finding these bigger opportunities. My first multifamily deal we did was 225 units, raised some money for that, and then found a partner and raised a bunch more money. And so I was able to basically 20x my net worth in about 4 or 5 years. We've raised about $50 million now to help people really solve one of three problems, or all of them. It's getting more cash flow, appreciation, or tax benefits. So there's different investments that we do. We've shifted a bit from traditional real estate and multifamily to go a lot more of oil and gas and other sorts of private businesses, and even debt funds and other things that really provide cash flow or tax benefits for investors.
Yeah. Now, let's kind of take it back to when you were in that space where you realized there was a lot of you not having that time freedom. Because I think that's interesting, because a lot of our clients are in the same boat, right? Where they I would call them, settled slavery. Like you look at their outside life. From the outside, everything looks great. They might take those vacations, and they look like that's great lifestyle, and they kind of do, but they also know they're a slave. Like they're a
Yeah.
slave to that lifestyle. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. No matter how much money you make, if you're doing a time for money trade, so for example, let's say I'm a surgeon and I make $1,000 an hour or $500 an hour, whatever the amount is. If I still have to go in and do those procedures, I'm still a slave to it. I'm still stuck
Yeah.
to it. And you'd say, well, I like doing it, or I'm okay with it. Well, what happens if you have a family member, God forbid, becomes disabled, or you become disabled, or if you just get to a place where you want to take time off, or it's not really a place of freedom. So it's great if I mean, there's a great conversation on the fire yourself conversation where it's like, there's three levels of financial freedom, right? The first one is replacing your living expenses. So for me, I realized I didn't need, I was making over 200K a year. I didn't need 200K. I needed like, 5 or 6K a month. So about
Yeah.
70K a year was kind of enough for me for what I needed to live, for rent, for my housing, my, whatever the things were, the insurance, and it was
Mhm.
enough to travel and do other things I wanted to do. And then I could start building on that. But I think
Yeah.
that for a lot of us, we look at it and we just think, hey, we're not really seeing it, that like, I really should be thinking about this. Like I should have been thinking about when I was 20 years old about how I'm going to actually, work out of a job, not because I have to, but because I'm able to.
Yeah.
And then, most people though, about 65% of workers, they say, are disengaged at work. They don't enjoy their job or their business. And so I think it's hard. How do you get to a place where you can grow your business, you can grow your life, you can grow your investments with you being less busy? And that's kind of the equation that we try to play around with, of like, is it possible to not work at all or work a lot less? Or maybe you work, but you work in a totally different way. You're a volunteer and you're making money on this other side over here. So I think there's just that conversation is very relevant for a lot of people.
Yeah, I can kind of see how those three levels really work in. Like your first level is what we call financial independence, which is
Yeah.
different than financial freedom. Just because
Right.
you can pay your bills doesn't mean you're free, right?
Correct.
But yeah, but then you can replace your income, which is definitely usually a bigger amount than what is just to pay for expenses. And then it's the almost like the FU money, at
Yeah.
that point,
Yeah. Yeah.
for
Life of
that
your
third
dreams.
level, right?
Sure. Yeah, 100%. No, that's it. And I think, all those levels are important. I think it's just so important to figure out what you really want. I just
Yeah.
was talking to somebody recently about this, that, if you're not getting what you want out of your life, so you might be saying, hey, I'm kind of still in the building phase, but it's been a few years. I have a friend I talked to that, for the last 5 years, 6 years, he's been saying, oh, I'm just right around the corner, just right around the corner, but it's not really getting him the results that he wants. And so instead of just head down in the business, maybe it's time to take a step back and just like, am I getting the results I want? And if not, what do I need to shift in my approach, right? Maybe there's something fundamental I need to do differently so that I actually can start building this freedom that I want, right?
Right, exactly. Well, let's take it to this next level too, because you mentioned that obviously you started getting into alternatives, and it seemed like you kind of just jumped right in. But what
Yeah.
what was that process like? What got you from just doing the typical traditional mutual funds, slave and save away, to all of a sudden going to alternatives? Like, what was that moment that you started to learn that that was even a possibility?
Yeah. So I think like as I watch people, even as an investment advisor, when I was working with people's money, I realized that like nobody really became wealthy by doing that. It would
Uh-huh.
hopefully maintain your wealth. It would hopefully not, you wouldn't lose your wealth. Maybe you'd hedge inflation. You kind of keep up with the market. But I'm just reading, honestly, when you start reading books, you start learning, you just realize like stocks or the traditional method is actually inherently very risky.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people just don't realize. And the other thing too is there's a lot of things, there's misalignment of interest. My book, I talk about this at Wall Street, is there's a dark side of Wall Street, that Tony Robbins came out with a book. I read this book years ago, and it was called Money Master the Game. And it
Mm.
basically said the average mutual fund will say the fees are about 1.2%. So if you have a time dated fund with Vanguard or Fidelity or whatever, they'll say it's a
Yeah.
certain amount, but they legally have all these fees like administrative fee, cash fee, exchange fee, who knows what these fees are, but they do not legally have to disclose these to you. And
Hmm.
they're typically about another 2%. So it adds up about 3.2%. Plus, if you have a money manager, you have an advisor, a fund person, or they typically take another 2% on top. So you're looking at
Right.
about 5.2%. And the average returns are typically only 6 or 8% per year. So it basically becomes a glorified savings account. But
Yeah.
if you go back in history, even just the inherent like fluctuations in the value of the stock market, there was a time in 1929, we talk about the big crash, the stock market crashed 89% and it didn't recover for 25 years. So you just think of
Mm.
like an 89% crash. I'm not saying this will happen, but it could happen. I mean, we think everything's super stable, but a lot of people have a lot of money here and they're looking for wealth there. It's just there was a time in there that people would say like about stocks, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, why would you ever buy stocks?" Right? So that's why people are
Hmm.
buying. They're not alternative assets; they're actually real assets, right? So we talk about real
Yeah,
estate or real assets. These are the real things people should own. So we all kind of know we should do it, but it's just trying to find the way. How do I do it in a way that's not going to make become another job for me, right?
that's right. If you've been following this podcast, you're probably looking for great ways to create passive income right now, right? Well, we got you covered here with Central Lending. Central Lending specializes in alternative investments that actually are designed to create steady returns and long-term financial security for you and your family. Now, they prioritize transparency. They love, building those strong relationships, giving you that confidence and peace of mind, knowing that you have your money working harder for you, so you don't have to work so hard for that money. You want to learn more how to do that? Go to centrallending.com and check out what they've got today to create your passive income and wealth creation right now. Well, for you, I mean, what do you see right now? I mean, speaking of the stock market, I mean, we're seeing, I mean, as of the date of this recording, obviously this is going to be a little bit later, but we definitely seen stocks having a hard year in 2025. With that being said, where are you seeing opportunity for yourself? Like when you're handling money and dealing with that kind of stuff, where are you seeing the best opportunity?
Yeah, so it's been interesting. Even in real estate lately, it's been more challenging since rates rose pretty quickly.
Yeah,
In single family, prices have been pretty stable, but in large multifamily, a lot of markets, the prices went down by 20 to 40%. The same
right.
property in the same condition 2 years later, just because the new buyer coming in, they're not getting a 4% or 4.5% rate, they're getting a 9% rate, or they're getting some much higher rate. So it really reduced the prices there. And what that's really done, Chris, it's really, especially with insurance and all these other costs going into it, it's really
Mhm.
reduced the amount of cash flow. These used to cash flow fairly well, especially after some sort of value add or coming in and renovating units and things like that. It's just become much harder. So we've shifted to go into things that really are higher cash flow. And I talk about this in my book, Fire Yourself. I say, always ask every investor I talk to, hey, what's more important to you, cash flow or appreciation? And a lot of people are like, well, I'm not sure. Some of both, appreciation and cash flow, but they're really not sure. But I'm of the belief that cash flow is it's so far superior
I
because
agree.
cash flow, it's what allows you to leave a job. It's what allows you to have money coming in. And people that are not financially free, meaning they're at a full-time job, cash flow is amazing because that's what will allow you to leave your job. And then I know a guy that's worth over $500 million and he loves cash flow, right? Because it covers expenses. So
Mhm.
whether you're wealthy or you're not as wealthy, it's super, super powerful. So we're seeing that right now in things like oil and gas, both owning land that's a little more conservative where there's existing wells on it, where we just kind of cash flow through that, or doing new drill welling, which also has some great tax benefits. There's kind of
Yeah.
some benefits there where it's kind of magical, right? Where people invest and then it becomes like active income can actually be reduced. So again, no specific
Yeah.
tax advice, but it is really magical. And so it's really cash flow, and then the tax benefits is what we're focused on now. We're also buying an e-commerce business, which is very high cash flow, and then we have some other things on a debt fund side that produces some cash as well. So we're really focused pretty heavily on the cash flow side right now.
And rightfully so. I mean, that's everybody kept saying, like, what do I do about inflation? They keep focused on appreciation. It's like, no, just get income. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
really matters at this point.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yeah, that's it. And people other people don't really know what they want, but I think it's if you really look at it, if you were to develop, if you were to become to that place, the first place of freedom, as you're mentioning, where you've got independence, right? You've got the kind of the nut, the expenses covered. It may not be that high, right? So if you're
Mhm.
making 100, 200, 300, 500,000 a year, could you generate a couple grand a month or 3 grand or 5 grand or 10 grand a month? You can, if you just are strategic on how you do it, you get in with the right people and you find a way to grow that over time, then it can become like this snowball that actually you can live off of, which is incredible.
Yeah, I call it the income avalanche, right? So where you
Yeah.
just keep reinvesting that income and that cash flow and over to compound your income rather than compounding your interest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
100%.
So as you're seeing the moves, I mean, what would you say to somebody who's saying, "Man, like, I mean, I've seen my some of my money lose in the stock market, but I'm still not sure about wanting to move out." What would you say to them?
I would say everything sounds weird until you do it or you met somebody who's done it. So I think that
Mhm.
for a lot of people, and I've had, like 2,500 calls with high net worth people, we've raised a bunch of money, but a lot of times, like if it's like, if for example, here's a call I can think of where a guy, physician who's worth $5 million, who has his own practice, who's only maybe he's late 50s, has only done stocks and bonds and has a money guy, right? Well, that's
Mhm.
going to be a more basic conversation around like, hey, what is syndication? What are some of these passive deals? What does it look like? And what I always encourage people is there's really two ways you're going to grow your wealth, really grow in any area of your life is really networking and education. So, right, if you want to learn, getting in the room, and I think live events, especially if we have local meetups in Los Angeles, I used to run one here for 5 years. Whatever market somebody's in, there's meetups, or you go to a conference. Go to a conference is even better, and you'll find people that are very serious about it. You'll find other investors and been doing this for years. And that's a great relationship, right? I mean, as much as I want to help people, I have my own deals and we're raising money for things. But if you meet another passive investor that has been doing this for 10 years, there's nothing to sell. They're just simply talking about their experience. And they say, hey, I've worked with this group for 10 years. They're awesome. Or, hey, I know you're talking about this group. I would never work with them for this reason. Like that's really valuable information, right? And
Mhm.
so it goes less of like this, hey, I don't know anybody doing this to like, actually, I do have peers in the space that are involved with this. And I see there's actually thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people doing this type of strategy. It's just we haven't heard about it because we're not Wall Street. We're not spending billions of dollars advertising. There's even some limits on being able to advertise. But it's if you're willing to get out and have conversations, it's a great way to become more comfortable with it.
Yeah. And you have the Wealth Forum, is that correct?
Yeah, the Wealth Forum. We started this last year. It's been incredible. We basically work with high net worth individuals, accredited investors that are really we put people in the room. So it really is great for people that are looking to grow their network. We do a live event each quarter in person. We also do some virtual calls and things, and it's just been amazing. We've had some phenomenal guests come and speak. I just was recently in a room with Grant Cardone. We hosted an
Mm.
event in LA with 180 people, and so I was co-hosting that event. And so we're going to try to get him for the next one maybe in June. But just trying to get people in the room that are really, if you're in a great room, there's people in there that are also in the same place. Maybe people have a business, they're looking to sell, looking for tax strategy. Actually, one of these examples, I'll share this. We had a guest come in who's not part of the Wealth Forum, but she and her husband have about 10 million in equity in single family houses and very little debt, just like 4% of very, very low debt.
Yeah.
And sitting at the table, there was a guy who has 8,000 units. He's a syndicator, has 8,000 units. And then also another guy who's got about 1,500 units. And I kind of asked him like, well, hey, here's what what do you think a good, amount of leverage is, right? Because again, if you have all this money tied up, she's probably getting a 2 or 3% cash on cash, right? So it's very low
Right.
returns. If she were to have more leverage or maybe put it into a different type of asset, what sort of return on equity is she getting? So she could do a portfolio loan. They were talking about different options. So some of those conversations, again, there was nothing anybody was trying to sell her. It was just kind of like, hey, as another fellow investor, what could be helpful? And this is how people hear about new deals. This is how people get ahead, or they get, a tax strategist. They get involved with new things that really help them save a lot. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for things like that in our group or other groups as well.
I love it. Now, if they want to follow you, Bronson, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, the best way, I have a gift actually for your audience. It's basically, we all know that inflation has picked up a lot. The last few years, things cost about 50% more than they did. So I wrote this guide called "How to Use Inflation to Your Advantage." So it's a PDF. I can send it to you. It's strategies using real estate, debt, also some stuff using precious metals and borrowing and other things, some unique strategies. And so if people text the word inflation to 33777, I'll just send that to you for free. Inflation to 33777, and then we'll let you know kind of what we're doing, our future deals. You can kind of reach out in other ways, but that's kind of the best way to get connected.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very generous of you. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be excited to read that book.
Thanks, man. Well, I appreciate. I love what you're creating too, man. Money does ripple, and I love that you're creating ripples for people.
Yeah. Well, likewise. That's good. It's good to see somebody that actually like kind of got away from drinking the traditional mutual fund Kool-Aid and decided
Yeah.
to go do something completely different, you know?
Yeah, it's like that Wizard of Oz scene where it's like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right? Once you see that, you're like, wait, that's not the Wizard of Oz. There's actually just some little guy back there talking. It's you can't unsee it. Once you see what Wall Street really is, you're like, I don't know, I don't want to be a part of it. And I still buy a stock here and there, but I'm much, almost everything is in alternatives or real assets, as we say.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, last question for you is we obviously it's the Money Ripples podcast. So we talk about that ripple effect you can create in people's lives. So Bronson, what do you feel is your ripple effect that you're here to create on this planet or even just for people in general?
Yeah, so my big why, Chris, is I heard a story of a woman a young lady who was being rescued in Greece, the country of Greece, and was rescued from human trafficking. So it's kind of a really tragic story. She'd been there's a long story there, but when she was rescued, just the trauma that she'd been through, and just with tears in her eyes, she said, to the rescuer, "Why didn't you come sooner?" And the rescuer said, "Well, we didn't know you were here, but now we're gonna do everything we can to try to help girls like you." And so to me, I have a daughter who's 12, and it really touched me to say, this is really the reason why I'm put on this earth, is to end modern day human slavery. So today there's 20 to 40 million human slaves. It's hard to believe it's even true, about 3 times the size of Los Angeles. And it keeps getting worse. And so unless we continue to take action, awareness, and just do whatever we can to stop it. So that's what I feel like I've been put on this earth for.
Oh, I love that, man. That's a huge mission, and it's something that
Yeah.
definitely we can't just do alone, but
No,
it's definitely
no.
something we can do together.
100%, 100%. Yeah. So it's huge, it's big, but it's like, you know what? Even if I can't do it for everybody, I can do it for one, I can do it for two. I can just in a
Right.
small way, it makes a huge difference for the world. So
I love it. Well, Bronson, really appreciate you being here. Again, we'll put in the show notes, guys. You can go text them inflation at 33777 and get that available for you guys for free. So a great gift from Bronson. So really appreciate your time here today.
thanks so much, Chris. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Same here. Everybody else, hey, remember, like you can listen to this show all day long, but the real difference that happens in your life is when you actually do something about it. You take action. So find a way to take action on this. Be sure that you make it a wonderful and prosperous week, and we'll see you later.